My grandson pushed me into the lake. My whole family laughed. No one helped. And I, soaking wet, shivering, my lungs full of dirty water, still had to smile to save face for them. If you think you're a beloved member of the family, let someone throw you into freezing water and just stand there watching. You'll find out exactly where you stand in their lives. My name is Eleanor. I'm 68 years old. My knees ache. My left shoulder, the one I had surgery on last year, throbs all the way to my skull when the weather turns cold. I live with my son, my daughter-in-law, and my grandson in my own house. The house on the edge of Cedar Lake, the one my late husband and I laid the first brick for with our own hands. We were having a barbecue that Saturday afternoon. It was summer, the sky was crystal clear, and the cherry tree on the porch had just shed its last few blossoms. It was just a family-style thing. A few of Zach's friends, my 19-year-old grandson, came over too. The kids were laughing, running barefoot around the yard with cans of soda in their hands. I was standing by the grill, flipping burgers, the smell of smoke clinging to my old mint-green cardigan. Bianca, my daughter-in-law, told me not to worry about the cooking. But that was just something to say. She just sat there, sipping her wine, chatting with some friend about a spa weekend. Grayson, my son, was his usual self, silent, offering me nothing more than clipped phrases that barely qualified as sentences. They live in my house, eat from my plates, use the microwave I bought, and sit on the sofa I've kept pristine for years. But most days, I feel like an old souvenir, nice to have around, but no one would notice if it were gone. I wasn't going to tell this story. But I need to write it down. Because if I don't, I'll go insane. That afternoon, I was standing on the edge of the wooden dock. The small dock that juts out into the lake, where I used to fish with my husband, where a little Zach once cannonballed in when he was just learning to swim. I raised a hand to smooth my wind-tousled hair when I heard a snicker behind me. "Grandma," Zach called out. "Been a while since you went for a swim, huh?" I turned around. He was standing there, his t-shirt soaked, a smirk on his face. Next to him, two of his friends were live streaming on a phone. "You even remember how to swim?" one of them asked, his tone half joking, half serious. I gave a weak, uncertain laugh. I haven't been swimming in decades. My shoulder is stiff as a board. Zach winked. "Let's test that theory." Before I could process what he said, I felt two cold, wet hands on my back. A firm, decisive push. No hesitation. I lost my footing. My feet found nothing but air. For a split second, my eyes met his. He was still smiling. That smirk was clearer to me now than the lake water that splashed into my face a moment later. I fell. Cold. Sudden. My body felt as heavy as a stone. I tried to flail, to kick, but I couldn't remember the last time I'd been in the water. My left shoulder felt like it was breaking all over again. I swallowed mouthfuls of water, coughing violently, my hands slapping at the surface, expecting no one. I taught Zach how to swim in this very lake. He was afraid of the water. I had held him in my arms and said, "Grandma's here. You won't die from swimming." Now I was the one struggling, and no one on the shore even called my name. I surfaced after a moment. I don't know how long. Maybe 10 seconds. Maybe a lifetime. When my head broke the water, this is what I saw. Grayson standing by the grill, holding a skewer, his eyes averted. Bianca, laughing, holding her wine glass, turning to whisper something to her friend. Zach. Zach was tapping on his phone. Then he looked at me and grinned. "Tough old bird," he said. "Look at that, she's still alive. No one ran over. No one threw me a life preserver." No one even let out a gasp of shock. They just continued. I swam to the shore like a criminal. My hands were shaking. My shins were scraped and bleeding from slipping on the rocky bank. My dress was soaked through, heavy as mud. I climbed out of the water like a drowned corpse and stood in the middle of a lawn full of people. And they, the people who share the name Whitford, kept eating barbecue, kept talking about their trip to Palm Springs next week. I collapsed onto a wooden bench under the red maple, 10 paces away from them. But that distance felt like a hallway in a nursing home. Long, cold, and lonely. No one turned. Not a single glance. That's when I remembered something. When Zach was 5, he drew me a picture, me in a red cape, flying through the sky, with a wobbly caption, "Grandma is my superhero." Now he pushes his superhero into the water, in front of his friends, and laughs. I didn't die that day. But something inside of me never came back. That was the first time I realized I could be murdered, and still be expected to smile for the sake of the family. I dragged myself to the back of the house, soaked from head to toe. The cotton dress clung to me like a second skin. Every step on the wooden floor left a wet, smudged footprint, as if I were tracing a path of shame leading toward no one. The downstairs bathroom is where I keep a beige towel just for myself. No one else uses it. One time I accidentally left it on the left hook, where Bianca hangs hers, and the next morning, I found it on the floor, damp and streaked with mud. Since then, I've only hung it on the hook to the far right, on the inside, a way of reminding myself, don't touch other people's things, even in your own house. I took off my wet clothes. My skin was goose-pimpled and bruised purple on my left shoulder, the old surgery site, now throbbing again. I stood in front of the mirror and looked into my own eyes. They were bloodshot. My hair was a tangled, matted mess, stuck to my cheeks in wet clumps. My face, it wasn't the face of a gentle grandmother anymore. It was the face of a stranger who had just survived a flood. I dried myself off and put on a thin sweater I kept hanging on the back of the door. No one knocked. Not a single, "Mom, are you okay? Or do you need anything?" To be honest, if someone had knocked right then, I probably would have been more startled. Because, at least, I was used to the silence. I stepped out of the bathroom and walked slowly toward the patio table. They were still sitting there, the family I once thought was my anchor. Zach was telling a story to his 2 friends. All 3 were giggling. "She was like a crippled duck," Zach laughed, spreading his arms to imitate how I had struggled. "Her hands were just flapping, 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 like she was trying to fly." "Zach," Bianca said, her voice a long, drawn-out sound, half mock scolding, half encouraging. "Stop it, that's mean." Although, she took a sip of wine and glanced at me, she was being a bit dramatic. No one stopped as I approached. I pulled a plastic chair out and sat at the far end of the table, the spot usually reserved for kids not yet tall enough for the main chairs. On my plate was a burnt, cold-baked potato and a hamburger bun that had been broken in half. I ate in silence, my mouth chewing, but my mind not registering what. No one asked if I was hungry. No one poured me a glass of water. Grayson sat across from me, his eyes glued to his phone. He nodded along to the music in his headphones, as if the sound could block out my very presence. I looked over at Zach. He was on to another story now, but it was the same mocking laugh, the same look in his eyes that I once thought belonged to a boy with a beautiful soul. I remembered him when he was 9, on a winter night so cold it cut to the bone. I was sleeping on the living room couch because my back hurt too much to climb the stairs. He walked by, saw me shivering under a thin blanket, and ran to his room to get his favorite dinosaur pillow and his fuzzy fleece blanket to cover me. "Are you cold, Grandma?" he'd whispered. I nodded. He sat down beside me, saying nothing more, just sitting there, holding my hand until I fell asleep. I used to think, this child will grow up to be a good man. Now. He used to tremble when he saw my leg bleed. Now he laughs as he watches me drown. The party ended around 9. Everyone did a quick cleanup, then retreated to their rooms. Grayson went upstairs with a beer and his laptop. Bianca was still on the phone, her voice low but sharp as a razor. Zach. No one knew where he was. Probably still sharing the clip on Snapchat or adding filters to his Grandma Falls in the Lake masterpiece. I went to my room. It's on the ground floor, facing the backyard. It used to be the guest room, but after I fell 2 years ago, the doctor said I should avoid stairs. Bianca suggested I move downstairs so it's easier to take care of you, but now I understand. It was to more easily separate me from the upstairs, where they lived together without me. I turned on my bedside lamp. The soft yellow light fell on an oil painting hanging on the wall, a portrait Zach painted of me when he was 12. My face was beaming, my silver hair somehow looking like a superhero's, and behind me was this house, and next to me was him. That day he'd said, "You're the strongest person in this house, Grandma." I'm not strong anymore, but I am awake. I pulled open the small drawer of my nightstand and took out an old brown leather-bound notebook, the kind I'd bought at a discount store in town last year. I'd been using it to jot down recipes and keep track of the monthly utility bills. But this time, I turned to a blank page. My hand was shaking. Not from the cold, but because, for the first time, I was about to write down what I didn't dare say out loud. Not to my son, not even to myself. I picked up the pen. Wrote in black ink. The letters were a bit shaky, but clear enough. They will never get the chance to drown me again. I put the pen down, closed the notebook, and pulled up the covers. Outside my window, the wind rustled through the garden, making the old wooden swing creak, all by itself. My husband used to sit there, reading the paper, calling me Elle, and asking if I wanted tea or coffee today. No one calls my name now. But tonight, at least, I had called myself back. For the first time in years, I wasn't just surviving. I was waking up. I woke up early the next day, my back aching from my neck to my hips, as if someone had spent the night shoveling out what little was left of my old age. I'm not a complainer. Never have been. Other people get sick and moan about it. I just sigh, rub on some liniment, and get back to making sandwiches for the family. But that morning, as my feet hit the cold hardwood floor, I knew my body was sending a warning. Not just because of yesterday's fall, but because I was living in a house where my soul was no longer spoken for. A car pulled into the side drive. I knew instantly who it was. Dolores. My only old friend, the kind who never bothers with the front door. She always comes through the kitchen. Friends use the friend entrance, she always said. I never argued. I opened the kitchen door. Dolores stood there in her old denim jacket, holding a paper bag from the bakery near the main market. "Ellie, what in God's name happened to you? Your knee is bruised black and blue," she blurted out as I stepped back to let her in. I looked down. The bruise hadn't faded. I hadn't even noticed it until she mentioned it. My head still felt foggy, as if the fall had happened to someone else, not me. Dolores set the bag of pastries on the small kitchen table. She looked at me, her eyes stripped of their usual playful glint. "Turn around." I stood still, not reacting. Dolores walked over and pushed my hair aside. I heard her sharp, quiet intake of breath. There's a bruise on the back of your neck. Ellie, did someone push you? I didn't answer right away. I just pulled my sweater down and poured a glass of water from the glass pitcher in the fridge. The water clinked against the ceramic mug printed with dandelions, a gift from Zach in the 5th grade. It was Zach, I said. My voice held no anger, no pain. It was just a statement of fact. Like saying it was raining outside. Dolores was quiet for a moment. Then she sat down in the chair across from me and pulled a business card from her bag. Thick, textured paper, a simple silver border, raised blue lettering. Peter Langford, she said, placing it in my hand. And estate lawyer. I had him redo my papers 2 years ago. Right after my Charlotte started asking about my house like she was a real estate agent. I remembered that story. Charlotte was Dolores's daughter, once known for being sweet and successful, now a chief accountant for an insurance firm in Ohio. During one visit home, Dolores told me Charlotte had suggested she sign a medical power of attorney, saying it was, "So we can handle things quickly if something happens to you, Mom." It sounded reasonable. But I remembered what Dolores said next. No one should sign over the keys to their life to someone who only calls them by a title, not by a feeling. Dolores pushed the card closer to me. "You don't have to act now," she said. "But you need to hold on to your right to decide until the very end. Don't let them write your ending for you." I took the card and studied it for a moment. The name Peter Langford hit my eyes like an invitation. Or an anchor. I didn't know if I was ready. But I also knew I didn't want to be the one to drown in my own home, literally or figuratively. We sat in the kitchen for a long time. Dolores peeled an orange, arranging the slices on a small plate, telling me how Charlotte had recently sent her a form for a preventative asset trust for dementia. I listened quietly, but my mind drifted to another image. Zach at 10 years old, telling me, "Grandma, I don't want you to get old. If you get old, who will spoil me?" I still hadn't answered that question. But maybe I was no longer the grandmother he remembered. The door swung open. Zach walked into the kitchen, holding a sports drink. A friend was with him, blue-dyed hair, sunglasses worn indoors like he was living in a rap video. They both walked past Dolores and me without a word of greeting. I looked up, trying to manage a small smile. Just enough to show I wasn't holding a grudge. Zach glanced over, not breaking his stride. "The old lady's still awake," he said. His friend burst out laughing. "Heard your grandma can fly," he choked out, coughing from laughing too hard. Zach laughed along with him. I said nothing. Didn't react. I just held my glass and took a small sip of water, the way you take a fever-reducing pill. Gentle, but bitter. Zach and his friend vanished from the kitchen like a salty gust of wind. No one asked for permission. No one left anything behind but the aftertaste of ridicule. Dolores sat still, silent. She just looked at me for a long time. Then she reached across the table, took my hand, and squeezed it gently. We sat like that, 2 women, an old kitchen, the afternoon light casting shadows on the bread slices and the chipped tiles on the wall. I thought, I'm still in this house, but I'm no longer of it. The sentence drifted through my mind like a chill wind. Maybe I haven't been in this house for a long time. My body just hadn't left yet. That morning, I woke up earlier than usual. I still made my coffee with a traditional Finn filter instead of the Keurig machine Bianca and Zach used. The rich, earthy aroma of the coarse ground coffee filled the kitchen, warm and familiar, but I felt no warmth inside. I sat at the dining table by the window, waiting for the steam to rise from my white porcelain cup. The summer sun streamed onto the old faded tablecloth where my husband and I used to read the Sunday paper. His seat was now empty. I was beginning to feel myself fading from everything, too. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. It was just one line. "You should see this." Beneath it was a TikTok link. I hesitated for a moment, then tapped it open. The network was slow, but then the video loaded. I saw myself, my own body, in that video. The exact moment I was pushed into the lake. My body twisting, my arms flailing, my mouth open in a moment of pure abject terror. Zach had filmed it. And not just filmed it. He'd edited it. Added a slow motion effect, dubbed the Titanic theme music over it, and plastered a huge caption across the middle of the screen. "Old turtle on its back." I nearly dropped my coffee cup. My hands went ice cold. My throat was bone dry. I don't know how many times I watched it. Each time was like being dragged back to that moment. The moment I ceased to be a person in the eyes of the boy I had held, rocked to sleep, and driven to the doctor for his asthma on misty mornings. I left the table and sank onto the living room sofa. A relentless stream of notifications chimed from my phone. The dings came one after another, without end. When I opened TikTok, I saw the video had hundreds of thousands of views. Hashtags were piling up. Hashtag justice for Eleanor, hashtag push from within, hashtag grandma didn't deserve. That the comment section was an ocean of outrage. Someone wrote, "Who pushes their own grandma into the water and laughs? Throw him in jail. What kind of soulless grandchild is this? If I were her, I'd drain the bank account and write him out of the will." I was stunned. The outside world, people I'd never met, was defending me, feeling my indignation for me. Meanwhile, inside this house, Zach walked through the living room as if nothing had happened. His eyes were glued to his phone. I looked up, but he didn't even glance my way. Grayson came in from the backyard, paused when he saw me, then turned away, pretending to be busy with a phone call. Bianca walked past. I heard the sharp clicks of her typing on her phone. A moment later, I scrolled past the profile of Lena Hart, Zach's ex-girlfriend, and saw a short story update. "Bianca Whitford just unfollowed you." That afternoon, I received another message from the @Lena Hart account itself. She wrote, "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Whitford. That clip. Zach sent it to me a while ago, when we were still together. I knew it was wrong then, but I stayed quiet. I can't anymore. I've sent the clip to the local news." After reading the message, I placed my phone on the wooden coffee table, the one that still had a faint knife gash from when Zach was playing with a blade at 7 years old. I didn't cry. I wasn't angry. I just felt empty, as if someone had peeled away the last layer of an apple, leaving behind a dried-out core with nothing left to bite. That evening, Dolores came. She didn't need to knock. She just pushed the door open and walked in, carrying a bag of butter cookies and a box of chamomile tea. I said nothing. She didn't press me with questions. We sat in the kitchen as we always did, facing each other, the overhead light casting shadows on her face, more wrinkled than I remembered. Her eyes studied me for a long moment. I gave a slight nod and pointed to the phone on the table. Dolores opened the video. She watched it without a word. When it finished, she set the phone down. She took my hand, a grip firmer than any hug I had ever received from my own family. She said, "They aren't asking, but the world is listening." I looked down at Peter Langford's business card, still tucked in the kitchen drawer where she'd left it. I picked it up, turning it over and over in my hand. My voice was slow but steady. "Call him. I no longer believe in remorse. After that evening, after I told Dolores to call the lawyer, Peter Langford, things began to move faster than I'd expected. Dolores helped me organize all my documents. Savings passbooks, the deed to the house, the small, scattered investments I'd quietly built up from selling homemade cakes back when I was young. She was meticulous, practical, and I was grateful for it. I was never good with paperwork. Grayson used to say, "Just leave it to me, Mom." But most of what I left to my son, he only handled in the sense that he silently watched his wife handle it for him. And Bianca, the daughter-in-law I'd given the master bedroom to when she had preeclampsia while pregnant with Zach, was someone I no longer trusted. We sat at the kitchen table that morning. I brought out the old file folder, tied with a cloth ribbon and stained with coffee in the right corner. Dolores used a red pen to mark each item that needed review. Her handwriting was clear and firm, like someone who had once been an accountant. I felt like I was sitting next to someone who was not just my best friend, but the last person left who thought I deserved to be in control of my own life. We had been sitting for less than half an hour when the mail slot clattered open. Zach's footsteps on the porch, hurried, impatient, then a stack of envelopes fell into the mail catcher by the kitchen door. I went to get them. Among the junk mail and the gas bill was a single beige envelope with no return address. The ink was blue, the handwriting neat. I opened it. Inside was a one-page, handwritten letter on white paper. "Mrs. Whitford, I'm sorry for not speaking up sooner. But I can't stay silent any longer. They, Ms. Bianca and Mr. Grayson, are talking about hiring a private doctor to create a psychological profile for you, to legally justify putting you in a home. They're saying you're showing signs of confusion, that you're forgetful, that you can no longer manage your finances. But I know that's not true. Ms. Bianca is the one pushing for it. Zach, I think, is just doing what he's told. I'm so sorry. Sophie Tran." The paper trembled slightly in my hand as I finished reading. Dolores, still poring over the documents, hadn't noticed, but when she looked up, her eyes met mine instantly, and she said nothing. I handed her the letter. She read it, not with an outcry or a heavy sigh, but by clenching her fists. She placed the letter on the table as if she was setting down a knife. "This isn't a family matter anymore," she said, her voice sharp as metal. "This is a legal homicide, in the name of kinship." I didn't speak. I didn't cry. I just picked up my teacup. And for the first time since that day, my hand shook. Just a little, enough for a single drop to fall onto the white lace doily I kept under the tea tray, the same one I'd used at my wedding 42 years ago. One drop of water. Not salty, but bitter. That afternoon, just after Dolores had left to call Peter back, I sat quietly in the kitchen. The living room door opened. I heard soft footsteps in the hallway. Bianca walked in. She was holding a kettle, dressed in a sea-green silk nightgown, her sweet perfume wafting out as if to overpower the existence of anyone else breathing in the same house. She stopped at the counter, pouring boiling water into a thermos. "Tea, Mom." Her voice was light, even, but her eyes were a sweetened dagger. I looked up, held her gaze for exactly 1 second. Then I shook my head. "No, thank you." She smiled. "Well, if you need anything, just call. I'm heading out with Zach for a bit. The boy needs some fresh air." I didn't answer. She walked out of the kitchen as if everything were normal. As if the mother-in-law sitting before her had never been pushed into a lake, had never been the target of a plot to strip her of her own life. I watched her go, silent. When the front door clicked shut, I opened the drawer beneath the tea cabinet. I took out my wine-red leather journal, the kind with a tie string and slightly yellowed pages. I opened it to a new page. This time, I didn't write in black ink. I picked up a red pen, the kind used for correcting errors on bank documents, and wrote the first line, "I will not wait for them to throw me out." I put the pen down. The wind outside gently rustled the window curtains. The kitchen was empty. But I knew, for the first time in so many years, that from this moment on, I would no longer be silent. I arrived at Peter Langford's office on a Tuesday morning, under a light drizzle. Early July rain in this state isn't like October rain. It's not cold, but it's enough to make the air feel sticky and heavy, like the thoughts in my heart. Dolores drove me. She didn't say much on the way, just tuned the radio to an instrumental jazz station and let me rest my head against the car window, my hands clutching the brown document case I'd had for 10 years. I brought everything I needed, hard copies of my savings accounts, the deed to the house, tax returns, and the original handwritten letter from Sophie Tran. I arranged them in order as if I were a student again, afraid of forgetting something, even though Peter had said over the phone, "Just bring whatever you feel is important." His office was on the 3rd floor of a red brick building near the town center. It was small but quiet. The hedges outside were neatly trimmed. The glass door was so clean I could see the reflection of my slightly stooped posture as I approached. Peter opened the door himself, the same man with pale gray eyes and a smile that never quite reached the corners of his mouth. He offered me a seat in a brown leather chair and pushed a cup of tea toward me instead of coffee. He remembered I had stomach problems. I handed him the file. He didn't ask me many questions. Just one. "What do you want to do with what's yours?" I looked up at him. I answered slowly but clearly, "I want to give it to anyone who never pushed me into a lake, not even with their words." Peter nodded. He didn't start scribbling notes, just pulled a pre-printed asset allocation form from his desk drawer. "Zach's college fund. $50,000. Do you wish to transfer the entire amount?" I nodded. "Transfer it to the STEM Scholarship Fund for underprivileged students, just like I mentioned in my message." "In your name or anonymous?" I paused for a few seconds. "Anonymous. But please include a line, for the reason for contribution." Peter looked at me, waiting. I picked up the pen he offered and wrote in the top corner of the document, "For those who don't laugh while others are struggling." Peter suggested we have another witness besides himself to certify all the changes. I didn't hesitate. "Sophie Tran. My housekeeper." Peter nodded. "I'll make a note in the file, witness of ethical conduct." I nodded. Not because Sophie needed the title, but because I wanted every future record to state that in that house, there was still one person who saw and chose not to be silent. We moved on to the formalities. Signing each page. My hand trembled slightly with every signature. But Peter didn't look at my hand. He looked into my eyes, and I knew he didn't see weakness there. The last page was the official revocation of Zach's future inheritance. Peter read every sentence back to me slowly. He didn't skip a single word. It was as if he understood that some documents aren't just legal, they are the termination of kinship on another level. I signed. It was done. I put the pen down and took a photograph from my small wallet. An old print from a film camera. It was a picture of Zach at 3 years old, sitting on my lap, his head resting on my shoulder, a radiant smile on his face. My wedding ring was still on my finger back then. I looked at the photo for so long that Peter didn't dare interrupt. Then I tore it. Not an angry tear. I tore it slowly, right down the middle, separating myself from the child I had raised as my own. I kept the half with my picture. I placed the other half, the one with Zach, into the small wastebasket beside me, under an old sticky note. The rest no longer belongs to me. Peter said nothing. He just nodded, gathered the documents, and said in a measured tone, "All procedures will be effective within 48 hours." I left the office in the light rain, carrying a photocopied set of the documents and the torn half of the photograph. Dolores was waiting in the car. I didn't tell her every detail. She didn't ask. She just said one thing: "How does it feel?" I looked out the window, watching the small raindrops break on the glass. Like tears someone had held inside for too long. Like I can finally breathe in my own house, even though I'm about to leave it. The sun wasn't harsh that morning, but the light that slanted onto the porch was as sharp as a thin blade. It filtered through the blinds, casting straight lines on the worn wooden floor where I was pulling my small suitcase. It was silver gray, its wheels a bit loose, squeaking with every move. It wasn't large, just big enough for a few outfits, a journal, a small picture frame, and my husband's old flannel shirt. I didn't need anything more. The house was unusually quiet. Not a peaceful quiet. It was the quiet of a place where something was about to shatter, and no one dared mention it. The media had started showing up the day before. After the clip of me being pushed into the lake made it onto a CNN weekend news segment, a black car was always parked just across the street, the occasional flash glinting from a long lens camera. I didn't open the door. I didn't hide my face. I just let them wait. Silently. The same way I had once waited for an apology. For years. I walked slowly down the wooden staircase, the floorboards groaning with a familiar creak. Grayson had helped me paint these stairs when he was 15. Now, he didn't even look at them, as if the cracks in the wood were just another thing no one wanted to fix. I saw Grayson standing in the kitchen. He was looking down, his thumb swiping rapidly across his phone screen. The light from the window reflected off his face, but his eyes were empty. I paused for a moment, waiting to see if he would look up. He didn't. Bianca was folding laundry on the dining table, stacking white towels as if preparing for a weekend getaway. Her face was colder than usual, her lips pressed into a tight line. As I pulled my suitcase past her, she said nothing. No offer of tea. No attempt to stop me. No question of where I was going. I didn't wait. Zach was nowhere to be seen. But I could hear his voice drifting down from upstairs, distorted like an old, staticky speaker. "We're being framed. She has mental issues." The whole clip was a misunderstanding. I thought, if he had said that before sharing the video, maybe I could have forgiven him. But now those words had no weight. They floated in the air like fake butterflies from a cheap party store. I walked straight to the dining table, the place where everyone used to gather every Sunday evening. Where I used to set down hot, cinnamon-dusted apple pies. Where Zach used to chatter about school, Grayson would tune the old radio, and Bianca would scroll through her iPad while offering a perfunctory smile. Now all that was left were a few fake plants and a set of coasters printed with a wheat field. Something I had never chosen, something that never felt like it belonged in this house. I placed a small envelope on the table. No name, unsealed, not a long letter. Just one line, in the neat handwriting I had penned the night before under my bedside lamp. "I'm not disappearing. I'm just no longer of service." I pulled my suitcase out to the yard. No one ran after me. No calls of, "Mom, where are you going?" No, "Grandma, do you need help with that?" Even the front door didn't creak a goodbye. Bianca had replaced the hinges last week. I got in the car. Dolores didn't ask any questions right away. We just sat in silence as the car pulled away from the street where I had lived for over 30 years. We didn't turn on music. We didn't turn on the radio. There was only the sound of the tires gliding over the pavement and the occasional soft brake as we turned into town. The train station was quiet this morning, probably because of the light rain. The trees along the road were soaked, the smell of sap and damp earth reminding me of early mornings driving Zach to kindergarten. My hand holding a paper bag with a sandwich, his mouth babbling the lyrics to Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. I don't know when the last time I sang with him was. Maybe when he was 10. Or maybe I'd forgotten because he had stopped singing with me a long, long time ago. I went into the small restroom next to the waiting area. I took out my phone, removed the case, and opened the back. The SIM card was still there, thin, small, worth almost nothing. But on it were hundreds of unanswered messages, missed calls, and conversations that had never happened. I snapped the SIM card in half. A faint click echoed in the small room. I tossed it into the trash can next to the sink. When I walked out, Dolores was waiting by the ticket gate. She handed me a small paper bag. Inside were round butter cookies, the kind I've loved since I worked at the local tax office. I smiled. She looked at me, for the first time since that morning. "Do you regret it?" I answered without hesitation. "I regret not doing this sooner." I sat in car number 3, near the window. The train began to move slowly, pulling away from the station. I didn't look back. There was nothing left for me to forget. I wasn't there that day. Peter said I didn't need to be, and honestly, I didn't want to sit in the same room with them ever again. I had shared too many meals at their table, meals where kindness was just a veneer and silence had become the norm. The law office was on the 3rd floor, its frosted glass door bearing Peter Langford's name in a traditional serif font. The interior wasn't luxurious, but it was clean and orderly. Everything was kept to a minimum, much like Peter's personality. The appointment was set for Monday morning. As Peter said, the beginning of the week is when it's hardest for people to be fake. Grayson, Bianca, and Zach arrived on time. Not late, not early. As if they were attending a routine family meeting, not sitting down to hear the official financial verdict drafted in red ink by the mother and grandmother they had abandoned. A reporter from an elderly advocacy group was present, sitting in a corner of the room, taking notes continuously. Peter had informed them beforehand. No one objected. Perhaps because they still thought things weren't serious enough to be afraid. Peter entered, carrying a thick file in a light blue hardcover binder. He opened it, laying each page on the table. No small talk. No inquiries about their health. He began with a single sentence, his voice as even and sharp as well-honed steel. "I am here today as the authorized representative of Eleanor Whitford." The following words are hers, stated without coercion and with full mental clarity. He looked at each of them, his eyes devoid of emotion, just a look of confirmation. This is real, not a bad dream. Peter pulled out a sheet of paper and read slowly, enunciating every word. "I will not die twice. You laughed while I was suffocating. Now, I am cutting off your financial oxygen, not out of vengeance, but because I have woken up." The room was dead silent. Grayson swallowed hard. Bianca's hand tightened on her purse strap. Zach's face contorted. Zach was the first to snap, his voice a mixture of anger and confusion. "She's not well. She's showing signs of dementia. She's being influenced by social media. This is extreme." Peter's expression didn't change. He gave a slight nod, as if he'd been expecting this reaction. Then he calmly pulled a sealed envelope from the file, opened it, and produced a single sheet of paper with a clear printed heading, Certificate of Cognitive Capacity Assessment, Mrs. Eleanor Whitford. At the bottom was the signature of a forensic psychologist and the official seal of the State Board of Mental Health. Peter placed the paper on the table and looked at Zach. This is an evaluation from an independent expert, conducted before any legal changes were signed. The conclusion: sound mind. Fully aware of her legal actions. No signs of dementia. Would you like to try again? Zach shrank back in his seat, speechless. Grayson slumped in his chair, his face lost. Bianca remained upright, but her shoulders had begun to tremble. Her eyes glistened, not with sorrow, but with a loss of control. That was the one thing Bianca could never accept. Peter continued. He read each clause. Bank accounts permanently frozen to the three of them. The $50,000 college fund, transferred. Their names, erased from the previous will. The new beneficiary, an educational scholarship organization for disadvantaged students. Sophie Tran was listed as a witness of ethical conduct and would receive a portion of financial support for 5 years from an independent trust one had established. Grayson whispered, "Mom, did she really do this?" Peter looked up. She signed it herself, in full command of her faculties, in my presence and that of a second witness. Bianca finally broke, not with sobs, but with silent tears. For her, that was a flood. She wasn't crying out of heartbreak. She was crying because the scales had tipped. Peter stood, pulled a pre-printed scan from his jacket, and handed one to each of them. A digital copy has also been sent to your emails. The final note reads, he read aloud, his voice deliberate, effective immediately, inheritance revoked. Later, Peter recounted the scene to me in an email. He wrote, "They didn't curse. They didn't slam the table. They didn't beg. They just sat there like 3 people who had just discovered the house they'd lived in for years. Had never been theirs." I read that email while sitting on the porch at Juniper Hill, the new community I'd moved to. Sparrows were perched on the wooden fence. I took a sip of tea, feeling strangely light. I wasn't happy. I wasn't gloating. I just felt unburdened, as if a stone had finally been lifted from my chest. And I knew that, at last, my voice had been put into writing. I was sitting on my small balcony at Juniper Hill when the phone rang. Not my old phone. I'd tossed that in a trash can at the train station the day I left. This was a new phone, a new number, and only 3 people had it. Dolores, Peter Langford, and my new family doctor. This time, it was Dolores. I answered, and before I could even say hello, her voice came through, as clear and factual as a new news report. "You should know. They're in a tailspin. Zach dropped out of college. Bianca got fired. Grayson, he's been drinking every night." I didn't reply immediately. I just reached for my teacup, cradling it in my slightly cool hands. Dolores continued, her tone neither gloating nor sympathetic, just matter of fact, like she was reading an old local news clipping. Zach lost his scholarship after the university reviewed the second clip, the one where he joked about his grandma dying at the right time. Bianca's contract with that wellness company was terminated. The press was too much. They didn't want to be associated with an ethics scandal. Grayson hasn't been to work in 2 weeks. I heard he was called into HR. I just sat there. The wind rustled gently through the climbing vines on my balcony. The lake where I had fallen, it was dry in my memory now. But the sounds from that day still echoed with each heartbeat, like the steady beat of a wooden hammer. They did that. In front of everyone. Without remorse. The night before, Peter had sent me a series of links in an email. The old clip, the one of me being pushed, was now part of a special report on a TV program called Elder Abuse in the Digital Age. I saw the slow-motion shot of me falling, followed by the footage of Zach and his friends laughing. The host asked, "When people laugh as an elderly person struggles in the water, is that still family?" They interviewed experts, doctors, lawyers, and even other seniors who had been treated similarly. They spoke of autonomy, of the invisibility of the elderly in their own homes. Then came Sophie's segment. She appeared on a talk show called How Long Were We Silent?, where housekeepers, nurses, and janitors shared their experiences of witnessing elder abuse in secret. Sophie spoke slowly, her hands clasped together. "I used to think I had no right to speak up. I was an employee. But when I saw her get pushed into the lake, and the whole family, no one reacted. I understood. If I didn't say something, I was a part of it." The audience applauded. The host put a hand on her shoulder and said, "You just gave so many other people a reason not to be silent." Lena Hart also made an appearance. The young woman, her hair cut shorter now, wore light makeup, her gaze still firm. She recounted the story. Zach had sent her the clip as a private joke, then told her if she ever shared it, it would make Grandma lose face, not me. Lena said she'd stayed quiet to avoid trouble, but when she saw I didn't speak up, she realized silence helps no one. The online community rallied in support. Many called Lena the first of her generation to step out of line. Someone wrote, "Our grandmother's generation needs more young women like this." As for Zach, he never got a chance to defend himself. After the second clip was leaked, the one where he turned to his friends, laughed, and said, "What's the point of her living so long? Every time she calls, I have to pretend to care." His TikTok account was swarmed. His friends unfollowed him in droves. A close friend from high school posted a story, "I can't defend this anymore. I'm sorry I ever laughed with you." Zach's account was later deleted entirely. No explanation given. I read everything. Dolores sent me all the links, transcripts, and even an excerpt from an article in The Atlantic that referred to the Whitford case as a turning point in how society views the rights of the elderly. I read it all. But I didn't reply to anyone. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I had already said it. With my actions. With my signature. With my departure. That afternoon, I made tea and sat on the balcony, the sunlight warming my hands covered in age spots, wrinkles, and a few old scars. Dolores called back. Her voice was softer this time. "Don't you want to see them repent?" I thought for a moment, then replied, "I don't need an apology from people who never thought they were wrong." And I knew, in that very moment, I wasn't angry anymore. I didn't need forgiveness, either. I just needed freedom. And I had it. Mornings at Juniper Hill are always quiet. Not a sad quiet, but the kind of quiet you have to live long enough and be tired enough to understand its value. I wake up at 6:30, my hand touching the wooden nightstand to check the clock, a habit from a life where I no longer have urgent appointments. I don't have to make coffee for anyone. I don't have to think about who's eating what for breakfast, who needs what for a meeting, or if the boy remembered his jacket. Now, all I have to remember is to water the plants. I put on my straw hat and walk out to the small garden behind the complex. It was just an empty patch of dirt at first, with a few lavender bushes and wild grass. A week after I arrived, I volunteered to plant tomatoes. No one objected. Some of the residents jokingly call it the punishment garden, because anyone who breaks a rule gets assigned to weed-pulling duty. But for me, it's the first place I've gotten to do something I want with my own two hands without anyone supervising, correcting, or saying, You don't need to do that, Mom. The soil is lightly damp this morning. My hands get muddy. I carefully touch each stem. The tomatoes are growing fast. I've named each pot, just like I used to name my dolls as a child. Lucy, Hank, and Gilda. No one asks why I name them. And I don't need to explain. After watering, I return to my room. There's a stack of mail on the table. Peter sent another finalized document, this one from the Scholarship Foundation. I nod, put it in a drawer, and lock it. It's also to stop myself from getting sentimental and looking at it whenever I feel down. A closed chapter should be left alone. Instead, I write letters by hand. It's been a long time since I've written a letter. But this morning, I pick up my pen and write to Lena Hart. Lena, you were the only one who didn't turn away. A young person who knows how to feel pain when another is hurting. You are the kind of adult I wish I had met from the start. You don't need to apologize. The fact that you stood up is the only thing I remember when I think of the past. Thank you for not choosing silence. Your friend, Eleanor. I fold the letter, put it in an envelope, and affix a sunflower stamp. One I'd been saving from last year, unable to bring myself to use. Next to it, I prepare a small package for Sophie Tran. Nothing grand, just a small notebook where I've written in purple ink, chronicling every small act of kindness she showed while working in my house. Things so small Sophie probably doesn't even remember them. Pushing my hand away when I tried to lift a heavy trash bin. Quietly leaving my favorite hard-boiled eggs in the fridge, though no one had asked. Standing in front of the door to block it when Zach kicked a chair in anger. I write each line in neat script. On the last page I write, "You thought no one saw. But I saw. And I am grateful." That afternoon, I go to the memoir writing class in the community center. There are about 8 of us, all with gray hair and slow speech. No one hogs the microphone. No one tells stories just to one-up the others. Today's topic is, who am I, if not for the title I once held? I open my notebook. On the first page, I write slowly, very slowly. I am a survivor, not because I am strong, but because I refuse to drown in their indifference. That night, I sit alone by the window, looking out at the freshly watered garden. The night air is soft. The light from the hallway casts a warped rectangle on my wall, like the old window frame in my former kitchen. No one calls for me. No yelling, no blaming, no one asking, "Have you seen my white shirt?" Or, "Mom, do you remember I like my toast light?" I only hear the sound of crickets. And the steady rhythm of my own breathing. Being alone isn't lonely. It's the first honest space I've ever had. I didn't think I would write this. When I left that house, I thought I had written everything that needed to be said. But there's one thing I never said out loud. Not to Peter, not to Dolores, not to anyone who asked me, "How do you feel after everything?" And it's this. I am not a victim. I am a survivor. And I chose to live according to what I deserve, not what others think I should endure. If you are reading this, I suspect you are also someone who has given more than you've received. Perhaps you are a mother, a grandmother, a woman who has sacrificed everything to keep a family intact, even when you yourself were long broken. I know that feeling. The feeling of walking through the living room and no one looks up. The feeling of calling a name 3 times just to get a one-word answer. The feeling of being treated like an object, always there, always present, but never truly seen as a person with thoughts, feelings, and limits. We are often taught that silence is patience, sacrifice is love, and yielding is our role. But after 68 years on this earth, I've learned only one thing. No one should stay in a place where their existence is treated as an inconvenience. I didn't write my story for pity. I told it so that you, the person reading this, Know that it is never too late to walk away. It is never wrong to set a boundary. And sometimes, you have to withdraw your value for others to learn it isn't free. Maybe you don't have a lawyer named Peter. Maybe you don't have a friend like Dolores. But you have yourself. And you have a voice, even if it has been buried under silence for far too long. If you are reading these final lines and thinking of someone, a grandmother, a mother, a woman who smiled while her heart was bleeding, please send them this story. If you have ever been overlooked, forgotten, or erased from the very picture you painted for your family, I hope you know you are not alone. We don't need to be thanked. We just need to be seen. Speech balloon. If something in this story resonated with you, please leave a comment below, so that I, and all the women like me, know that somewhere someone is still listening. Thank you for listening to me, Eleanor Whitford, the woman who was pushed into a lake and swam back up to write her own ending.